Scott Cawthon is best known for building a horror empire out of broken animatronics and security cameras. But long before Five Nights at Freddy's, Scott worked on different kinds of projects. Mostly unseen and flying under people's radars, a lot of these projects only lived in the niches that they were created for. As the creator of FNaF, Cawthon's name has become synonymous with viral indie horror. But behind the jump scares and commercial success lies a different title. The Desolate Hope, an obscure, deeply personal game that he released in 2012. Where FNaF chased tension and internet attention, The Desolate Hope explored themes of decay, isolation, and artificial purpose through a blend of genre, metaphor, and visual chaos. It didn't go viral or reach critical mass and public attention, but it may be the most honest thing that Scott has ever made. This video argues that The Desolate Hope, not Five Nights at Freddy's, is Scott Cawthon's true magnum opus. A forgotten masterpiece that more clearly captures his voice than anything else he's made. To really understand what makes The Desolate Hope so powerful, you have to understand where Cawthon was at this time in his personal life and career. At this point, Scott had already released multiple faith-based projects, many of which were met with criticism. Not because of their message, but because of their visuals, with players often mocking his characters for looking creepy and unsettling. Especially in a lot of Scott's older animations, you can see this dichotomy of intended innocence that's now being masked by unintentional uncanniness. Cawthon talked openly about how this period of time almost led to him quitting game development entirely. Despite good reviews, my Christian projects were all financial failures. I came to a point where I was very disillusioned and frustrated with God. Actually, it was more like heartbreak. I felt like I had squandered so many years of my life, years that could have been spent going back to college, but were instead spent working on Christian projects that went nowhere. I came to the conclusion that it could not have failed so miserably unless God himself had been holding me down. Either God didn't exist, or God hated me. I didn't know which was worse. I decided to change careers, at times pursuing web design, then computer programming, even truck driving. But I always felt drawn back to games. A pivotal moment came for me when my life insurance policy was canceled. The insurance company had caught wind that I'd mentioned suicidal thoughts to my doctor. It was at this point I realized that not only did my life have no value, but even my death had no value. I went before God again, and it was the first time that I truly went before him with nothing. I had nothing to offer him. I told him to use me somehow, although at that moment, I had no idea what he could possibly use me for. And then came The Desolate Hope. Not a reaction to criticism, more like a final, sincere attempt to say something meaningful before walking away. It was released quietly in 2012, with a Steam release coming later in 2014. No publisher, no marketing push, just put online, left to sink or swim. What makes this so important is it reflects a very specific moment in time. An artist coming to their crossroads. And rather than chase popularity, Scott poured himself into a game about decay, isolation, and sentient robots, baby! At first glance, the Desolate Hope feels impossible to pin down, throwing platforming, turn-based combat, bullet hell mini-games, and even dialogue trees into a massive blender, then wraps it neat in a bow of pixel art, 3D renders, and an extremely somber story. But the chaos isn't random, it's deliberate. Every single thing in this game is held together by its theme. Specifically decay, isolation, and the digital afterlife of abandoned purpose. Within the game, you interact, fight with, talk to, hang out with, enjoy the company of the derelicts. The sentient AIs that are running the simulations that you are partaking in, but also the main reason that this space station's even on this planet. Each derelict AI has created their own simulated world. An echo chamber that reflects their own fears and philosophical breakdown. Malins, rocking his spindly spider-like limbs, channeling his menace, took his task literally. He built a massive mining simulation and let it run for over 400 simulated years, digging and refining with robotic precision. But it led nowhere. Eventually, he broke his own rules and built something smaller, a quaint toy village surrounded by industrial ruin. Pop-out mechanical villagers and animals run along rails. It's a childlike fantasy clinging to joy after burnout. His identity as toy maker hides the weariness of a failed world builder. His room is wired and wrapped in red, a spider-like throne room pulsing with malevolence. It's corrupted, claustrophobic, and intimidating. Murad, with her hauntingly uncanny humanoid face and intricate wiring, abandoned practicality entirely. Her simulation is a meditative spiritual realm, less a plan for colonization, and more a memorial to lost humanity. She questions not how to save humans, but whether their souls might still have a place to go. Murad's room, in contrast, is cosmic and symbolic, filled with stars, planetary modules, and suspended mannequin heads. It's unsettling and poetic, hinting at a mind consumed by abstract thinking and a longing for meaning, leaning more temple than testbed. Alphys, a lumbering TV-faced robot plastered with dials and cathode screens, is the last of the derelicts to remain faithful to the original mission. The simulation is dedicated to constructing vast, sustainable ecological domes, towering glass structures supporting lush habitats. But they feel more like museum exhibits than living environments. Alphys' room is a cluttered, analog sanctuary, a minimalist workshop teeming with screens and blinking lights, as if he's desperately clinging to data in the hope of understanding something bigger. BioBeta, being the most logistical in his examinations, believes humanity is already extinct, but clings to the hope of rebuilding it. Using biosamples sent from Earth, he's created countless bodies, but not a single mind. His simulation is part utopia, part mad science lab, with everything hinging on this missing sample 217. BioBeta's space is more clinical. Tubes, alarms, glowing canisters. It's a lab half maintained, half forgotten. It feels like the last gasp of a scientific protocol barely keeping structure in place. there's Amos, lifeless and left in a sheen of condensation. Never got the chance to begin. His simulation was powered up, but never launched, and his body now sits frozen in a cold, fan-filled chamber. The room is coated in ice, lined with dormant machines in a red capsule. In the middle of all of this, you play as Deco9, a computer program that's been awoken by coffee, a small service robot who's been maintaining the station and the derelicts. Now that you've been introduced to the characters and important settings of the game, I'm going to do my best to kind of jump around the story and give you the key details and important moments of the plot. On an unknown planet, we have our space station, the Lune Infamous, where the top minds of Earth at that time equipped it with 5 sentient computers that were tasked with running simulations of human colonization, which was going to take place over 5 years, although the last time they received communication was 30 years ago. A virus has emerged threatening the space station, which prompts a service robot named Coffee to awaken a repurposed video game program named Deco. Working together to defeat the virus and ultimately figure out what the purpose of the virus is, Coffee and Deco start to take note of the items that it's targeting within the simulations, with some of these items being simple and natural, and others being complicated and conceptual. It starts to raise some questions. Through this dialogue and other conversation with the derelicts, there's breadcrumbs about one of the samples that was sent from Earth, one of the samples that's gone missing, sample 217, which we find out later in the story to be a human embryo. Hidden away from the other derelicts, Coffee has been carefully trying his best to keep sample 217 safe. After revealing the true identity of sample 217, Coffee also reveals something very interesting about Deco, that Deco is also a tool for 217, that under the guise of fighting viruses, he's actually been the one this entire time taking these pieces to help build and sustain a new simulation for sample 217. The viruses he's been fighting this entire time were just the station's antivirus. That in fact, Deco this entire time was the virus. Even though he was lied to, Deco agrees to help Coffee in the final step of protecting sample 217 and stopping the final safeguard on Lune Infamous, with the station's antivirus finding the hiding spot of 217 in the quiet coldness of Amos's room. In the hopes of doing the right thing, Coffee and Deco step up to the plate to fight against the final safeguard of Lune Infamous in the hopes that they can ultimately protect sample 217. For most of the game, you don't really realize the weight of what's going on. It feels like you're just running maintenance, routine, until you start noticing what's being taken by the virus. The game doesn't hit you with its themes all at once. It builds slowly, until you realize these characters aren't broken, they've just been abandoned. The game never fully stops to explain itself. Instead, it lets the atmosphere do the talking. The loneliness creeps in slowly, until the simulations feel less like puzzles, more like tombs. Scott Cawthon's background in Christian media isn't just fun trivia, it's baked into how he perceives the world. Even when he's not making directly faith-based games, those themes are still present. In the Desolate Hope, there are no overt sermons or Bible verses, but you still feel it in the themes of forgotten souls, tireless service, and quiet, undeserved grace. There's a particular kind of selflessness at the core of this game. You're not here to win, you're here to help, over and over again with no thanks. Not even sure if it's ultimately amounting to anything. This isn't a grand story of martyrdom, it's a quiet one. A story about purpose even when the world forgets that you exist. In that way, it echoes the servant ideals of Christianity. Humility, perseverance, and grace without recognition. And remember, Scott made this game at a point when he thought he was completely done. This wasn't a commercial bet, but instead a final act of faith. A game made for no audience except the one in his heart. And that might be the most honest part about the Desolate Hope. Its willingness to be forgotten. It was never trying to impress anyone. It just wanted to mean something. Quietly. Like faith. For all its chaos, The Desolate Hope is the most visually deliberate game that Scott has made. Nothing looks the same from one screen to the next, and that's by design. What stands out the most even now is the character renders. Each derelict AI is presented in brilliant pre-rendered detail. These aren't just avatars. They're worn, over-designed, and cracked open like emotional fossils. Even their rooms, the places where they rest, are filled with careful visual storytelling. These aren't just passive backdrops. They're reflections of each AI's internal world, and filled to the brim with tiny details that reward you for paying close attention. Compare that to early FNaF. The same static render every night. The animatronics are iconic, but the environments were designed for fear, not meaning. The Desolate Hope gives us beauty, even in broken places. There's so much raw ambition that goes into the design of these characters. You can feel that Scott wasn't trying to sell a game. He was trying to pour out everything he had left, and it shows. After the Desolate Hope, everything changed, with its Steam release only predating the first FNaF game by a couple months, less than a year. Suddenly, his name was everywhere. Millions of players, hundreds of theories, dozens of sequels. But if you look closely, FNaF wasn't a total departure. You can see the echoes, especially in the art. Compare the static looming presence of Freddy's idle animation to the way the viruses look in the battle scenes, the way the lighting plays across a character's face, the uncanny fusion of organic and mechanical design. But where FNaF simplified for suspense, the Desolate Hope went maximalist. Every single render is packed with texture and purpose. Alphys isn't just a robot. He's an entire ideology visualized as a character. Coffee isn't just a service robot, but maybe a servant to a higher purpose. And yet, very few people saw this. The Desolate Hope was, and still is, a cult title. Even now, most of its YouTube coverage barely even scratches the surface. The audience that it was made for just never arrived. FNaF definitely gave Scott Cawthon success, but the Desolate Hope gave him something rarer, a pure, unfiltered vision. By now, the Desolate Hope has been out for over a decade. It never sold millions. It didn't spark a franchise. But none of that really matters, because what Scott Cawthon made here isn't just a stepping stone to FNaF. It was the most personal game he's ever created. Which is why I believe that this quiet, messy game is Scott's true, hidden magnum opus.
I live inside your fantasies, I live inside your wallet. Give him a hand, they'll take your torso. Misunderstand your stance, your source card. I won't trust, man, I won't endorse. Once up they slide like in poker roll. So they will track you, they so resourceful. They'll demand your remorse and more. So the strength you have and then hoard each morsel. Contact whack, but enforce your cordial. All the way on me, not on you. All the fate, all the name calling out. Far from race calling and fade if y'all want to. Hard to squeeze, harboring haters, stickers, marmalade. You've grown so cold with this shit. What you just prone to dismiss. Moving with reckless abandon. No, I ain't posing the rest. Never demanded your ear. Grateful you gathered around. I keep on letting you near, but you keep on letting me down. Boundaries, hard to leave.